Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast with the Institute of Coaching. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Matzelle. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Terrani, as we interview Dr. Joel Bennett, psychologist, author, and president of Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems, or OWLS. Joel has spent decades working at the intersection of workplace well-being, behavioral health, and coaching, having worked with close to 250,000 workers across the United States and abroad. He is also the author and co-author of 9 books and has contributed and written to many additional research journal articles. In today's episode, we interview Joel about our relationship with time, describing this quietly urgent issue impacting leaders, coaches, and workers. Joel explains how our relationship with time can impact our health and well-being. Understanding not only how busy we are in experiencing time pressure, but also the various ways in which individuals experience time pressure. Drawing from his master's research on love and power in romantic relationships, Joel introduces his practical framework built on social capacities, acceptance, presence, flow, and synchronicity, the building blocks he lists to build a better relationship with time. Whether you're a coach supporting overworked clients, a leader modeling sustainability in the workplace, or simply wanting to improve your personal relationship with time, Joel has a practical framework for you to explore. So get ready for this episode of Coaching Revealed, where we explore different ways for individuals to perceive time. And now, our conversation with Dr. Joel Bennett. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. My name is Austin Matzelle with the Institute of Coaching, and I'm joined with my co-host, Emily Terrani, as we are interviewing Dr. Joel Bennett today. And Joel, I'm going to go through your bio first. Joel Bennett is the president of Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems, OWLS, a consulting firm specializing in evidence-based wellness and e-learning technologies to promote organizational health and employee well-being. Dr. Bennett first delivered stress management programming in 1985, and OWLS programs have since reached close to 250,000 workers across the United States and abroad. He's the author and co-author of 9 books, including Heart-Centered Leadership, Raw Coping Power, and Quest for Presence. He is the primary developer of team awareness and team resilience, evidence-based culture of health programs recognized by the Surgeon General and the U.S. Department of Health as effective in reducing employee behavioral risks. Team awareness has been previously adopted by or through several organizations, including TGI Fridays, the U.S. National Guard, and the Appalachian Regional Commission. In 2022, he won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Wellness Institute and the Positive Leadership Award from the Positive Leadership Institute. He earned his bachelor's degree in psychology and philosophy from State University of New York and his MA and PhD in psychology from University of Texas, Austin. Dr. Bennett was previously on the board of the Academy of Management's Spirituality and Religion Interest Group and is currently on the board of directors for the National Wellness Institute. So Joel, how are you doing today? It's so good to see you.
Great. It's great to see you too. And Emily as well.
Just to get us started, would love to know what has attracted you to the field of coaching?
I think it just happened. When I was a teenager, I was part of a clique. Have you ever been part of a clique when you were 16, 17 years old, or whatever, 15? So it was one summer. This is in Far Rockaway, New York City. This is in South Queens. And we would all hang out at night in the condominiums where there was a pool shed. And we would sit around the pool shed just talking. You know how teenagers are, and talking and talking. And for whatever reason, because I was prone to philosophize early on, I just started talking and people would share things and I would share things and then I would provide insights. And I just remember one time we were doing that and they were just listening to me enraptured. It just felt so wonderful to be listened at so intently by my friends because I felt like a loner. I felt like nobody cared. You know what? What do you, as a teenager, you're like, what is going on here? I think that's what happened. It's where it started.
How did that transition into coaching, though? I'm curious to hear more.
later on, people would come to me with their concerns and I would just listen. It just sort of organically evolved. And then I went to grad school to clinical psychology. And what's fascinating there is that clinical psychology was a bit too clinical for me. So I didn't do that, and I moved more into consulting. So we could talk about the differences between coaching, therapy, and consulting and the overlaps between those. So it really wasn't coaching that I ended up doing, but more the what I call coach salting.
But you specifically have done a lot of research related to coaching too, which is part of why we wanted to talk with you today. So can you go down that pathway with us of how did you bridge from consulting and coaching to into the research area?
Yeah. So a lot of the training that you Austin mentioned earlier is evidence-based programs that we developed for workplaces to reduce behavioral health risks and to reduce stigma for seeking help and to actually help the local work climate be supportive of employees who are struggling with mental health or substance use problems. So as a result of that training, I started doing train the trainers. Actually, quite a lot of train the trainers. We have a lot happening in the world. And as I was doing those train the trainers, I've started to have coaches come to my classes. And in 2014, I published a book called Raw Coping Power: From Stress to Thriving. And some of these coaches who were taking my classes to be facilitators of a classroom training in the workplace said, "Hey, I'm starting to use your material for coaching. You really should teach a class in coaching on this stuff." So I said, "I will if you help." And that's how that started. And then I've taught quite a bit of coaching classes. I'm teaching one now through the Employee Assistance Professionals Association called Thriving Informed Practices. And we've done research on the competencies associated with this coaching practice. So that's the answer. And then the other piece to this is that a colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Arlosky, who is a coach teacher, he dragged me in as well.
I like the idea of all these different avenues you found kind of dragging you into the space that you are currently. You have the work that you've done in the space of teams and the research that you've done on wellness or the impact of different types of coaching on wellness or on substance abuse. But in our previous conversations and a lot of your other work kind of focuses on the idea of time and presence. And so I would love to kind of open up the field here and let's get started talking about, what is this concept of time presence to you?
Well, I'll connect those dots by saying my master's thesis was on love and power in romantic relationships. Okay, so let's go over that. Yes, folks, that's what I said. Love and power in romantic relationships. So I'm going to make that connection. And what we found in that work is that the way two partners in an intimate relationship share love and share power is a very dynamic process. The principle is that the person who is least interested in the continuation of the relationship, i.e., has less love, is the person who typically has more power. But it's much more complicated than that. Although that is true, that's what we found. It's called Waller's Principle of Least Interest in Sociology. We had 100 couples in the study, and I started really understanding that relationships change. And they change sometimes at a faster rate than the partners within them are understanding, except for those partners who take the time to be with each other. So I stumbled upon this thing called time and intimacy and realized that there's no intimacy without people pausing, stopping, listening, and being with each other. That became the beginning of a lot of work, which resulted in a book published in 2000 called Time and Intimacy. I began to really listen to what was happening around me and saw that people were not taking time, not just in romantic relationships, but anywhere. I started seeing all this research on time pressure, and I started seeing how the lack of pausing, being present to other people is at the root of a whole lot of problems. Fast forward, last year, this study came out of workers' psychosocial risk factors. And the number one risk factor for employee health and well-being, 43%, and I can send you this reference, of the US population experiences time pressure. So that's how I came to it. I hope I answered the question.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started.
No, absolutely. And that's such a massive group of the population. I'm wondering, with the work that you've seen from other researchers and in the initial work that you did with all these couples, what type of data was coming out that was showing how people were experiencing time pressure? As a researcher, how are you seeing the experience of time pressure on the individual?
Well, the earlier studies that, this is a way back, was this whole idea of type A personality and urgency, which now has been translated into workaholism and workaholic work climates. The type A personality, although there's questions about its empirical coherence, is associated with cardiovascular disease. I mean, that's what I mean. Time pressure, the press to get things done at a quicker rate than you can as a human being, is the basis of burnout. It's the basis of cardiovascular disease, and it's even related to depression.
How do you help people then that are workaholics, that do have this sense of urgency? What do you do when, how do you help them move away from this and have a different relationship with time?
I first have to walk the talk. So I really mean that. We're very experiential. All the work we do, even though it's evidence-based and there's curriculum, and it always comes down to creating a safe place where people can get to know each other and share their experience. So I'm a grateful Al-Anon, 30 years in recovery. The only reason I'm here is because I've learned from the wisdom of others who've walked the path before me. So how I help people is by first taking care of myself. And I know that may not be the quick tip. Here are the 7 things you can do to stop being a workaholic, right? For people who are interested, I would highly recommend looking at Workaholics Anonymous. It's a 12-step program. Ann Wilson Schaaf wrote a book called Meditations for Women Who Do Too Much, and there's a lot of good material in there. But really what that points to is having a daily spiritual practice, a daily practice that involves contemplation, and how much time you spend, of course, people will say it's up to you. But all the spiritual teachers for millennia have said you need to spend 2.5 hours a day in contemplation. At least 10% of your time. That's what they've said. So now all you have to do is pick up your phone, get an app, and swipe a few times, and there's your contemplation. What's that about? So the first thing I would say is stop that, put your phone down, don't use any app, go out in nature, look up at the sky, right? Hang out with your pet, your people, put your feet in the water. Okay, did I answer your question?
To some extent. I guess to phrase it a different way, what are the ways that we can help as a coach ourselves or clients to rethink how they relate to time?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Emily. Outside of what I just talked about, I want to take a step back. We first have to understand what time pressure is. There are different types of time pressure. There's the cultural pressure that we talked about earlier, right? The culture is at a very fast pace. So we have to recognize that's the system that we live in. And to realize that maybe if you're feeling time pressure, it's not your fault. You just get born into the system. So have that mindset. That's one type of time pressure. The other type of time pressure, and we do research on this, is hectic work climate, workaholic climate, overwork climate. Regardless of your industry, you might be working in a situation where it's just work, 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 time pressure, time pressure, time pressure. And even in the same company, different departments will have different time paces. So that's a second type of time pressure. A third type of time pressure is occupational. So certain occupations really do have to work very quickly. First responders, firefighters, and certain, it's like feast or famine. So you have to understand the pattern of pace in your occupation. Another type of time pressure is, as I mentioned earlier, self-imposed, right? The impatient driver who's always having to achieve, and that's the internal time pressure. But there's another one that's really important, and that's circumstantial, where you are meeting with somebody, it's a very important meeting, and they really want something from you, and you have another meeting that's coming up. Think about it as a coach. You could be at the end of your time, and bam, only in the last 5 minutes does the client start really to get it. And so how do you navigate that, right? So that's emotional intelligence. So you may not have any other time pressures, but you do have the circumstantial one. So you have to learn how to pace yourself during a coaching session. That last one's very important because as a coach, it's not just what you say or how you navigate the relationship. It's also how you manage the time of your session. Because if you do a very good job of transitioning toward the end and out of the session, then the other person feels like you care about them. You're not just holding space, you're holding time. So I wanted to first talk about that because everybody's is experiencing different types of time pressure. If you have all of them going on, good luck, right? So now that I've said that, the soulful capacities, and I'm sorry, I hope that wasn't too much. Is that a good way to start here? Is that like?
Yeah, that was really helpful.
So the soulful capacities are our capacity to be what I call a time weaver or empowered around time or a tempo gnostic. I have all these different terms for it. They are acceptance, presence, flow, and synchronicity. Acceptance is the fundamental. If there's something in your life that you're not accepting, or if you haven't come to terms with, or if you have unfinished business, that's going to gnaw at you, and you're not going to be present to your life. Many of the workaholics I know are workaholics because they're hiding from something or they're escaping something that they haven't accepted. Grief is a part of that on one bookend, and gratitude is a part of that on the other bookend. So if you have unprocessed grief or you haven't fully done what you needed to do around a loss, that's going to impair your ability to be present. But at the same time, grief has its own temporal pattern. You cannot push grief response. You cannot, it has its own time. Gratitude, true gratitude, is something that also really, in its deepest sense, takes time. You come to be grateful because you worked through the resentment. So acceptance, there's a lot to acceptance. Presence is, even when you're struggling with acceptance, you can still be present to the struggle. You can show up. So if you're a coach and you're struggling to be present, it's good to talk about it. So what we do, and we'll do this right now, Austin and Emily, on a scale of 1 to 10, how present are you? 10 being you're fully here, you're listening. 1, you're distracted, you've got other things you're doing, you're working about, you're thinking about the next thing. On a scale of 1 to 10, right now, how present are you?
I'd say for myself, like an 8, because I'm focused on the conversation. I'm also thinking about future questions to give you. So I'm not 100% locked into every word you're saying.
I'd say my answer is probably exactly the same.
Why? Why can't you be at a higher level?
I think there is a time pressure. I mean, this is very accurate, right? We have to film this in a certain amount of time and making sure that we're picking up on key things you're saying, but also moving the conversation along at the same time. not such a laid back, experience as we would like.
And also, I wonder the capacity for individuals to be fully present at all times in the current moment, because time isn't necessarily a linear experience for us. It can be hard to not have a passing thought that can kind of pull you a little bit in another direction here and there. I could be thinking about other relationships, family, friends, career interests. My mind could be anywhere between the past and the present.
Beautiful, beautiful responses. And it shows me that you are more present than you may even realize the way you respond there, because you're keeping track of multiple things and you're mindful of the fact that you're doing that. So I want to point out that there's the surface sequence, which is where that treadmill lives, but there's a deeper process of our being. So the goal is not to be present. In fact, there's no goal. It's completely about being and striving after your own being, is what Carl Jung says. That's when you talk about your family and all these other things, what you're talking about is not being present now. And this is the clincher. It's being present to your whole life. Unfortunately, people misunderstand present as only being here now. That's a mistake that came out of a workaholic society. So I want to share with you how both of what you said comes together in this idea of balanced time perspective. So there's a great deal of research that was started with Dr. Philip Zimbardo, who passed away last year, on what's called the time perspective inventory, the time perspective scale. And this research shows there are different orientations to time. There's a person could be focused on the past, their negative past, and obsess about their negative past. And that surfaces or is epitomized in post-traumatic stress disorder. There are people who could be focused on the future, the negative future, and the positive past and the positive future. So positive past, nostalgia. Balanced time perspective is the ability or the orientation to seeing both the positive past and the positive future together. That is, we're not just, and also being here now. Individuals who have that balanced time perspective have greater well-being and they have greater wisdom. So when we talk about being present, right, we got through acceptance, now we're at presence. We're not talking about just being here now. We're being present to our whole life, because when we're present to our whole life, we have a greater ability to forgive ourselves, be gentler with ourselves. We don't always have to show up. Fear of missing out, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, those are all about having to show up. And what I'm saying is it's not only hurting our health and well-being, I mean, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's hurting our planet. So clock time is not the only version of time that exists. And being present means a deep recognition of that.
Is there some large differences between how an individual can feel present to their life in the past, current moment, and future, and perhaps how an individual can feel flow? How would you kind of differentiate between the idea of presence and the idea of flow?
Flow is often associated with activity and performance. And performing, achieving, making something happen. It's used a lot in sports, but it also applies to coaching. In fact, I think there's even research on the experience of when you are coaching, there are moments where it flows. The whole session just flows. So core difference there, and it's not a big one, is that in the flow state, there's an experience of timelessness. Time just disappears. It's like, wow, that just felt like 10 minutes, but we were together for an hour. Presence, you have the same thing, except for the fact that it's more like now. Here we are now. And being without having to achieve anything, without there being any performance necessary. How I bring them together in book 2 is I talk about Erickson's stages of development, where from infancy, going through trust, friendship, achievement, generativity. The exercise I give people is look at your whole life and see if you can find in your heart by looking at your childhood, teenager, transition to adulthood, getting your first job, first partner, marriage, children, or whatever. Contemplate how did that all flow? Can you see how one thing flowed to the next, to the next, to the next? Or was it just a jump? Did you just jump from this to that, to jump to this? And generally, it's not a jump. There's this, as you go back and you knit backward, you start to see, oh, that flowed into this, to this, to this, to this. So being present to your whole life also involves being able to see how it all flowed. So they overlap, but there are some differences.
Interesting, because I've heard of this more from meaning making, like reflecting back and seeing how things connect. I think it is interesting and insightful to realize that when you're going through it and when something feels like it's the worst thing happening to you ever, to kind of trust the timing of your life and that there might be a point in the future where you're able to look back and be like, oh, this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that. So that's a really cool way to think about it from the perspective of time. I did want to loop back to synchronicity. So how does that tie into this? How do you go from being aware and present to this?
What I would ask is for those of you who are listening, and both you, Austin and Emily, coming back to experience, how is this conversation happening, if at all possible, at the right time in your life? People who are listening, you're listening to this now. What, if anything, that has been said so far, it's like, oh, this is perfect that I'm listening to this now. What is that about? So you said it just a minute ago. You did a great transition there because looking at, oh, that was the right timing for that to happen. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. So synchronicity is happening all the time. We just don't see it. So that breakup, that divorce, that getting fired, that accident, that illness, that loss, it's like at that moment, there's no acceptance. You're struggling. But as you reflect deeper, you start to realize, oh, now I see how it all comes together. So we can learn to develop synchronicity as a skill. And there's a number of actual books on that. My question is, the mystery is, you have to live that. I can't tell that to you. But there are some tips and tools. So I would ask you if there is anything is there something happening in this interview that, like, today I needed to hear that? Does that help?
Yeah, that does. I definitely tend to overperform. Actually, as a coach, I help a lot of people with this because I relate to it so much. And I had a doctor appointment earlier, and it's literally and physically impacting my heart because of the stress. So I'm like, okay, I have to have a different relationship with time for my own well-being. So yeah, it could not have been at a more perfect time on a personal level.
Emily, we love you. We want you to take care of yourself.
Appreciate it. I'll be okay. I am okay, but it's weird timing.
I want to make a comment on that, Emily. Thank you for being a little vulnerable there, right? So thank you for that. I am also a practitioner of an energy medicine modality called resonance repatterning. I believe, human beings are energetic beings first. Then they're mental beings, then they're physical beings, or they're first spiritual beings. And so when I do a session with someone, something might come up that is like, there's a message here. And I highly recommend Emily Sadowski's book, What is Intuition? Because that's part of the synchronicity piece. And so what I think just happened, and you can, chime in here, is that there's a message here.
Yeah.
And what's really wonderful is that you're receptive to it. If you were a different person, we would just move on. No, I'd like to get to the next question because we're running out of time. That is where what I meant earlier on about intimacy, right? That we don't do that. But when we have the chance to really be with each other, we start giving to each other and learning together. And that's what we need more than anything.
So I'm curious, though, to get us back to, what are the tools that people can try and elevate synchronicity in their life? How can they be more open to it, be more tuned into it? What are the things that are within their control?
The first is what I just said, is like, without falling into the trap, oh, it's too deep. Don't think too deeply about it. It is what it is, But I do think having that intuitive, what is the message here? What is really going on is good. And again, as I mentioned, Emily Sadowski's book. The other thing that's fascinating, and this is a plug for the internet, is that when you are searching on the internet for something, you usually go down a spider, right? It's like this takes you to this, and that takes you to that, and that takes you to this, and this takes you to that. And interestingly enough, there is research on serendipity in bibliographic and library studies, where a librarian would be looking up for something, and then they find this other piece that they didn't think they would find, but it happened to come up. And so that's a metaphor or a model, right? So for those of you who do internet searching for whatever, pause for a moment and don't just land on what the search gives you, but go down a rabbit hole. And you might have to be a little bit of a cognitively oriented person to enjoy what I just said, but it could apply to anything. Even if you're into baseball stats, you'll go, oh, well, gosh, so, or football stats or anything. And so when you do that with your mind, it starts to prime you for looking for patterns. And that's what really synchronicity is about, seeing the bigger pattern.
What I'm curious about would be, in this moment, what would be some things you might want to share with any listeners who are encountering this piece as a wrap up from today's conversation?
I'm a scientist, so I mentioned this study earlier about time pressure, and I mentioned the time perspective inventory. There's another study I talk about in the connoisseur of time, because I always want to root people in other things that they can look and research. This study found the correlation between time management and satisfaction in life. Time management often occurs, like we're doing it now, in the context of performance in the job. So you manage your time so you can get the job done in time. So you would think that the more you learn or have time management skills, the more likely you're going to be satisfied with your job. This study by Aeon, A-E-O-N, 2022 maybe. Yes, the more time management skills you have, the more likely you're going to be satisfied with your job. But what they found was the relationship with life satisfaction was even stronger. People think that they're managing their time to get things done, but ultimately, when you start deepening into the deeper process of your life and your time, as a human being, you're only here for a certain period of time. So if you start to feel I have some control over my time, I know how to work with it, it brings deeper life satisfaction because you're spending more time in life, not just in your job. And we don't see that. And sometimes it takes statistics to show that. So if you are, like me, a workaholic or a recovering workaholic, take back your time, is what I would say, and realize that maybe you don't realize it, but really what you're after isn't success, but maybe what you're after is happiness.
Thanks, Joel. If people want to talk to you more about this, continue the conversation, look up more of your work, how can they do so?
Well, the Connoisseur of Time is our small little book. It's an audio, and it's in print on Amazon. Our website is presencequest.life. Organizationalwellness.com is the workplace stuff. So yeah, that's how you can find me, and I'd be happy to find the synchronistic moments with whoever contacts me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel. Thank you for spending time with us today. For all our listeners, thank you for spending time listening to this episode.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Terrani with Coaching Revealed.